Look at your garden shed right now. That spray bottle for fire ants, $14. The bag of grub killer, $22. The flea powder for the carpet your dog tracks through, $18. You spent close to $200 last season, and the bugs still came back this spring, didn't they? Here's what no one at the garden center will tell you. A $7 box of borax, the same blue and green box your grandmother kept under the sink handles, most of what's eating your garden right now. But there's a catch. The wrong recipe, the wrong concentration, the wrong spot, and borax doesn't just fail. It can hurt your soil, your cat, even your fruit trees. Stay with me. 5 simple recipes, 13 pests, all backed by USDA research and your state's cooperative extension service, the same folks your county agricultural agent works with. And one warning at minute 7 that 95% of garden videos never tell you. Now, before I hand you the first recipe, I need to clear something up because this is where most people get borax wrong. And it's why the box in their cupboard never seems to do what the internet promised. There isn't one magic borax recipe that handles every pest in your garden. There never was. What there is, and what I'm about to give you, is 5 simple methods, starting with just 2 spoons, that cover ants, fleas, roaches, mildew, wood-boring pests, and a few more. Each method works differently. Each one has its job. And here's the second thing folks miss. Borax doesn't kill bugs when they walk through it. It kills them when they swallow it. That's the whole secret. Different from every spray bottle on the garden center shelf, those kill on contact. Borax kills on dinner. Think of a worker ant. She finds your sweet bait, takes a sip, carries it back down into the colony, and feeds the queen and the larvae the way a mother chews food for her child in the old country. 3 days later, the whole nest goes quiet from the inside out. Slow. Much longer lasting than spraying the ants you can see. That's why you never spray a column of ants you see on the counter. You let them carry the bait home for you. And that one idea, the worker brings the poison to the queen, is the foundation of the very first recipe, the one most folks have been doing wrong for 40 years. Let me show you the right way. Weapon 1. The 1% sweet bait. Most folks butcher this first recipe by doing one thing wrong: they pour too much borax in. They think more powder means more dead ants. The opposite is true. Mix it like this. Half a teaspoon of borax, 9 teaspoons of plain white sugar, 1 cup of warm water. Stir until clear. Soak 2 cotton balls in it, set them on a small jar lid, and place the lid right on the ant trail, not next to it, on it. Walk away. The colony breaks down on its own schedule. The rule that makes this work is 1%. Above 1%, ants taste the bitterness and refuse the bait. They mark it as poison, and the whole colony learns to avoid it. Stronger doesn't kill faster. Stronger protects the queen. The same mix works on fire ants, with one critical change. You never pour it on the ground. That sweet bait attracts dogs, cats, and curious grandchildren. Put the bait inside a small jar with a screw-on lid. Punch 2 or 3 small holes in the lid, and set the jar at the base of the mound. Replace it every 2 weeks until the mound goes quiet, usually 3 to 4 weeks. If you have pets or grandkids around, always put the bait inside a covered jar like that. I'll explain why in more detail when we get to the dry powder method. Now here's a use almost nobody knows. Mosquitoes. Adult mosquitoes don't live on blood, they live on plant sugar. Females need blood only for eggs. Their actual food is flowers, damaged fruit, aphid honeydew. Give them a sweet source they prefer, and they'll feed on that instead. Same 1% solution. Spray it lightly on non-flowering shrubs around your patio boxwoods. Anything without blossoms in the early morning. Field studies have tested 1% boric acid sugar baits on vegetation and found significant reductions in adult mosquito populations, especially when mosquitoes feed on those treated sources instead of flowers. They drink, fly off, and die within a day or two. One critical warning. Never spray this on anything in bloom. Not roses, not tomato flowers, not squash blossoms, nothing bees are working. A bee that drinks borax sugar water off a flower dies, just like the mosquito does. Keep it on non-flowering foliage only, and you protect pollinators while you cut mosquitoes around the house. So that's weapon 1. 3 pests: household ants, fire ants, mosquitoes. The whole thing comes down to one rule: 1%. Don't go above that. If you've ever tried a borax ant bait and it didn't work, type failed in the comments below. I'll reply and tell you exactly what went wrong. 9 times out of 10, it's the same mistake: you mixed it too strong. Now let's move to Weapon 2. Weapon 2. Borax-and-flour, 1-to-1. Weapon 2 is for pests that don't drink sugar water, pests that walk through your kitchen and your shed at night when you're asleep. Roaches, earwigs, anything that grooms itself. The mix is simple. 1 part borax, 1 part plain white flour. You can swap the flour for powdered sugar if you want both work. Mix them well in a bowl until you can't tell them apart. Now here's the mistake most folks make. They sprinkle this powder like they're salting a steak, thick, visible, in piles. Thick layers fail. A roach sees a pile of powder and walks around it. What you want is a layer so thin it's almost invisible. Use a flour sifter or a small puffer bottle. Lay it in a thin line behind the refrigerator, under the stove, along the back of the cabinets, down the baseboards, anywhere roaches travel at night. The way it kills is simple. Roaches and earwigs constantly clean their legs with their mouths. It's grooming behavior. When they cross your thin line of powder, the dust sticks to their legs. They lick it off. They swallow it. They die 3 to 10 days later from internal damage. Texas A&M field trials documented over 90% reduction in German cockroach populations using this method. A word of warning before you start. This is delayed kill. You will not see dead roaches the next morning. You won't see them for a week. Most people give up after 2 days, sweep up the powder, and conclude borax doesn't work. It does work. You just have to trust the timeline. The same idea handles earwigs in the garden, with one small change. Instead of flour, mix borax with dry oatmeal at the same 1-to-1 ratio. Put the mixture inside small cardboard boxes, old shoe boxes work, oatmeal containers work, and cut 1/4-inch holes near the bottom. Set the boxes in shady spots where you find earwigs hiding, under flower pots, along the edge of the vegetable bed, near the compost. Earwigs crawl in, feed, and die inside the box. Empty the boxes once a week. Now, here's the warning I promised at the beginning of this video. The one most garden channels never tell you. If you have a cat, any cat, do not use dry borax powder on the floor. Do not sprinkle it along baseboards in a house with a cat. Do not dust it on the porch where the cat sits. Cats walk through everything. Then they lick their paws. Then they lick their fur. Every speck of borax they walk through ends up in their stomach within an hour. Cats process boron poorly, and it builds up in their kidneys over weeks and months. A vet will see kidney failure in your cat and have no idea you sprinkled powder under the stove 6 weeks ago. If you have a cat, use the sweet bait from Weapon 1, sealed inside a jar with small holes. Skip the dry powder completely. This is the single most important safety rule in this entire video, which is why I built the whole next method around indoor work where cats can't reach. Weapon 3. The 1-to-8 wood solution. Weapon 3 is for pests that destroy wood: termites, carpenter ants, carpenter bees, and the worm that ruins your apples every year. These pests don't eat sugar bait, and they don't walk through powder. They live inside the wood itself. So we deliver the borax to the wood and let them eat their way into it. The ratio is 1 part borax to 8 parts warm water. Stir until the powder stops dissolving. You'll see undissolved crystals at the bottom when it's fully saturated. That's the solution you want. Brush or spray it onto bare, unfinished wood fence posts, the underside of the porch, the sill plates in the barn, sheds, raised bed lumber, firewood you're about to bring inside. Anything wooden and exposed. Coat it well. Let it dry naturally for 24 hours. The borax soaks deep into the wood fibers, and when termites or carpenter ants chew through, they swallow the treated cellulose. The borax destroys the gut bacteria they need to digest wood. They starve inside their own tunnels. This treatment lasts for years on dry wood. But here's the limit. If the wood gets soaked by driving rain or sits in wet soil, the borax leaches out within a few months. So this works best on wood that's covered, raised, or under an overhang. Now for carpenter bees. You know the ones they drill perfect round holes into the underside of your porch railings, your wooden eaves, your garden arbors. The female bores in, lays her eggs, and the larvae chew tunnels for years. The fix is different from termites. You wait until evening, when the bees are inside the hole and quiet. Take dry borax powder, not the solution, and puff it deep into each hole using a small bulb duster or a turkey baster. Don't plug the hole yet. Wait 2 or 3 days. The bees inside have to crawl through the powder to leave. They get coated, they groom themselves, they die. After 3 days, plug each hole with a wooden dowel and seal it with paint. That hole is handled and sealed so the next bee doesn't move in. And now for the apple worm coddling moth. This is the worm that tunnels into your apples every season and ruins half your harvest. The trick that almost nobody outside old orchard families knows. In late winter, late February in the south, late March up north, before the buds break, you mix a thicker borax paste using the same 1:8 ratio, but with less water, until it's the consistency of heavy cream. You paint a wide band around the trunk of every apple tree, from about a foot off the ground up to 3 feet high. That's it. One painting, one tree, per year. Codling moth larvae overwinter in the bark crevices of the trunk. When spring warms up, they crawl upward toward the new buds and the developing fruit. They have to cross that band of borax paste. They eat through bark fibers coated with it, and they die before they ever reach a leaf. This same method works on pear trees, plum trees, and peach trees. Oriental fruit moth attacks those, and it behaves the same way as codling moth. So the painted band protects all of them, but skips citrus completely. Lemons, oranges, Meyer lemons, limes do not paint borax paste on these trunks. Citrus trees don't have the same trunk-crawling pest, so the band has no target. And worse, citrus is extremely sensitive to boron. Borax that washes off the trunk will burn the leaves and damage the roots. For citrus, use pheromone traps instead. They're cheap, and they target the specific pests that bother citrus. Weapon 3 covers everything wooden in your yard except citrus, which we leave alone. Pause for 1 second. Which of these methods are you going to try first this weekend? Comment the weapon number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I'm curious which one most folks need. Now let's move to Weapon 4. Weapon 4. Dry powder on surfaces. Weapon 4 is dry, borax straight from the box, nothing mixed in. This is the simplest weapon of the 5, and it handles 3 problems that have nothing to do with insects at all in 2 of the cases: fleas, mice, and basement mold. Let's start with fleas in the carpet. If you have a dog that goes outside, you have fleas in your house. The eggs and larvae hide deep in the carpet fibers far below where any spray reaches. That's why store-bought flea sprays don't fully solve the problem. Sprinkle plain borax powder lightly across the carpet every room the dog walks through. Work it into the fibers with a soft broom or a stiff brush. Leave it for 24 hours. Then vacuum it up thoroughly. The borax dries out the flea eggs and larvae hiding deep in the pile. Do this once in early summer and once in early fall, and you break the flea cycle for the entire year. 1 rule: get the dog and any cats out of the room while the borax is sitting on the carpet. Vacuum it up before they come back. Next, mice in the shed and the chicken coop. I want to be honest with you here. Borax doesn't kill mice quickly, and I won't tell you otherwise. But mice won't cross a heavy line of it. Same reason they avoid peppermint oil or steel wool. They don't like the feel of the powder on their feet, and they don't like the taste when they try to lick it off. Sprinkle a generous, thick band across the threshold of the shed, around the base of the feed bins, behind the chicken feeder. The mice get the powder on their feet. They don't like it, and they move on to your neighbor's shed instead. Refresh the band every 2 weeks. Finally, the cellar walls. The north-facing siding. The underside of the porch where the sun never reaches. Anywhere mold grows in the damp, dark corners of your house. Mix 1 cup of borax into 1 quart of hot water. Stir until dissolved. Scrub it into the moldy spot with a stiff brush. And here's the part most people get wrong: do not rinse it off. Leave the borax on the surface. As the water dries, the borax stays behind and keeps drying out the mold spores for weeks afterward. My grandmother scrubbed her cellar steps every April with this mixture. Lived to 87, and her cellar never smelled like a cellar. It smelled like clean stone. Weapon 4, the easiest of the 5. You can use all 3 jobs this weekend. Weapon 5, the gallon spray, 1 tablespoon. Weapon 5 takes us out into the vegetable garden itself. Weapon 5 is where dosage matters more than anywhere else. We're still using borax and water, but the dose changes depending on the job: 1 dose for soil, 1 for mildew, and 1 much stronger dose only for cracks in concrete. The rule that holds the whole thing together: boron is good in whispers, toxic in shouts. Boron does not break down in soil. It accumulates. Use too much, and you poison your garden for 3 years. Job 1, feeding the soil. If your cauliflower comes out brown in the middle, if your beets have corky centers, if your apples are pitted, if your broccoli heads are loose and uneven, your soil is starved for boron. Boron is a micronutrient that beets, cauliflower, broccoli, apples, and tomatoes need to set fruit properly. Mix your 1 tablespoon in a gallon of water and spray it evenly across 1,000 square feet of garden, one time in early spring. Oregon State Extension has been recommending this exact rate for decades. The harvest doubles when you fix the deficiency, but again, once a year, never more. Test your soil every 3 years and skip the spray if boron is already adequate. 2. Powdery mildew. That gray-white dust that spreads across your squash leaves and cucumber vines every August. The disease that turns a thriving vine into a dead one in 2 weeks. Mix 1 teaspoon of borax, not a tablespoon. Just a teaspoon for this job with 1 tablespoon of cooking oil in 1 gallon of water. Shake it hard until the oil emulsifies. Spray the tops and bottoms of the affected leaves in the early morning, before the sun hits them. The borax shifts the leaf surface pH to a level the fungus can't survive on, and the oil makes the solution stick to the leaf instead of running off. 3 applications, 4 days apart. I've saved squash vines I was ready to pull out and burn. Job 3 weeds in the cracks of the sidewalk, the driveway, the patio stones. Anywhere nothing should be growing. For this job you turn the dose way up. 1 1/4 cups of borax in 1 gallon of warm water, much stronger than the soil spray. Pour it directly into the crack on a dry, sunny day. The crabgrass, the dandelion, the creeping Charlie growing between your pavers, gone within a week, and they stay gone for the season. And the hard rule that goes with this one: keep this solution away from anything green you want to keep alive. Borax kills every plant it touches. Don't spray it near the vegetable bed, near a flower border, near fruit trees, near anything you've planted on purpose. Pour it only into cracks where nothing should be growing in the first place. Weapon 5. 3 doses, 3 jobs, 1 rule. In the right place, at the right strength, once a year. Before I close this video, I have to be straight with you. Borax is not a magic powder for every garden pest. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either misinformed or selling you something. If you're fighting squash bugs, squash vine borers, Japanese beetles, ticks in the lawn, aphids on your roses, moles tearing up your grass, squirrels stealing your tomatoes, or chipmunks digging in your beds, borax is not the answer. I don't want you wasting a single weekend trying it on the wrong pest. Here's why. Borax works in 3 ways: when an insect eats it, when an insect grooms it off its body, or when it crosses a treated surface. That's the whole mechanism. But squash vine borers live inside the stems of your plants. Borax never touches them. Aphids and whiteflies pierce straight into the sap of the leaf. They skip the surface entirely. Ticks only respond to body heat and carbon dioxide from a host they have no interest in bait. And moles, squirrels, chipmunks, those are mammals. Borax has no effect on mammals at the doses we can safely use outdoors. Each pest needs its own weapon. And that's exactly what I want to do next. If your pest is on that list, comment its name below. I'll count the most repeated one and make the next video on what actually works. Here are your 5 methods in 1 minute. Weapon 1. The 1% sweet bait. Household ants, fire ants, mosquitoes. Weapon 2. Borax-and-flour, 1:1. Thin layer, almost invisible. Roaches and earwigs. Weapon 3. 1 part borax to 8 parts water. Brushed on bare wood, puffed into bee holes, painted on apple, pear, plum, and peach trunks in late winter. Termites, carpenter ants, carpenter bees, codling moth. Never on citrus. Weapon 4. Dry powder, straight from the box. Sprinkled in carpets for fleas, banded across thresholds for mice, scrubbed into damp walls for mold. 3 jobs, no mixing. Weapon 5. 1 tablespoon per gallon for boron deficiency and powdery mildew. 1 1/4 cups per gallon for weeds and concrete cracks. Once a year, never near plants you love. 5 methods, 13 problems. 1 $7 box of borax. Compare that to the $200 worth of sprays sitting in your shed right now and decide for yourself which makes more sense. Save this video, bookmark it on your phone, write the formulas on a card, and tape them inside the cupboard. There's a good chance one of these 5 methods will save you a trip to the garden center this season. Next time, I'm pulling 7 cheap pantry and garden fixes for the pests. Borax can't handle wood ash, baking soda, white vinegar, cornmeal, and 3 more sitting in your kitchen right now, including a real method for squash vine borers, the one many of you keep asking about. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And tell me in the comments, what state are you gardening in this year, and what pest are you ready to put an end to?